So I mentioned before the fur trade. It continued until about I think about 1870 or so. And initially, it was what was called the coureurs de bois, runners of the woods. These were unlicensed fur traders, and then it became a requirement to be licensed, and that was the voyageurs. That's the difference between the two, and that continued until about 1870. But what also happened on the Ottawa River for travels was around 1800, or just shortly after 1800, the river became more, I guess, busy with the logging industry that had started. And this next song is about a depot farm and a stopping place called Halfway House. And if you look on the old park maps, Algonquin park maps, you'll see this feature called Halfway House. And there's a little post office there. There was a post office there. The farm was run by a guy by the name of Xavier Pilon, I found out, and in looking at the census information for 1911, I could see that he had a wife, Mary, and he had 3 daughters. And sad thing about this was one daughter died the age 16 in Riviere from pneumonia, because back then I guess medicine wasn't the way it is now, and then a second daughter died shortly after that, a couple of years later on the tracks in Riviere, being hit by a train. So Xavier had a difficult time, I'm sure, with that, and as well as running this halfway house. I should take a step back. The lumber trade actually started. So the big square timber trade for Canada started around in the early 1800s, and then the trigger for that was a conflict between Britain and France that happened in, I think, 1806 is when France had blocked the Baltic ports, where Britain was getting its supply of wood from to build ships and other things. So Britain looked towards the New World, or Canada, for a supply, and indeed that's how it came to be. So by 1810 or so, things were starting to happen. By 1840, the bush had thousands of men cutting trees, and the rivers were re-engineered so they could run log drives. And for all this to happen, they had these tote roads everywhere, these wagon roads or sleigh roads to bring men into the bush and supplies and food for the men, and as well, of course, feed for the horses and such, and all the hardware for the hitching and such. So so they had these tote roads and these halfway houses, or these stopping places, and so this song I wrote about this place off of the Brent Road called Halfway House is what we have now, and this is called Halfway There. And it's a story of Xavier Pilon and his family at this farm, written from the perspective of a lumberman heading into the bush, into the forest to cut trees. By rail and by steamer, with time I arrive at the place of 2 rivers, with the men for the drive. On a horse-drawn sleigh, southward we head, through the forest on a tow road as winter sets in. At times I would walk with the sleigh just ahead, 10 miles to the depot and 10 miles to Brent. The stillness of the winter on this winding tow road, I heard of this place that's halfway home. Oh, Mr. Pilon, your farm is so fine, 10 miles from the noisy CPR line. 10 miles yet to go on through to Brent. I wave at your daughters after time they're well spent. I heard of your daughter, of sickness she died. Her smile still lingers and I still question why. The steel heart that you forged from a horseshoe of spare, Xavier Pilon shaped it with care.
Oh, Mr. Pilon, your farm is so fine. 10 miles from the noisy CPR line. 10 miles yet to go on through to Brent. I wave at your daughters after time they're well spent. The horses were fed and the hitching repaired. Smoke from the chimneys stained the cold air. Large pots of the harvest steeped by the fire, sometimes with music late in the hour. Oh, Mr. Pilon, your farm is so fine. 10 miles from the noisy CPR line. 10 miles yet to go on through to Brent. I wave at your daughters after time they're well spent. I wave at your daughters after time they're well spent. This place in the forest now speaks without words, with the fields closing inwards and those sounds now unheard. From the ruins and stone fences and the rhubarb still there, lost to the stories of the place halfway there. Oh, Mr. Pilon, your farm is so fine. 10 miles from the noisy CPR line. 10 miles yet to go on through to Brent. I wave at your daughters after time they're well spent. I wave at your daughters after time they're well spent. Lost to the stories of the place halfway there.
That's Halfway There, the story of depot farms and tote roads and wagon roads from the early years of Canadian lumbering and square timber trade.